multi-tap.
At this great Melanin conference in Detroit. I was here last year and I did Melanin in the inner ear. And today I'm going to take a look in the brain and do some visuals with you and talk with you about information and research and spirituality relative to the pineal gland, or the epiphysis cerebri. That's the scientific name for it. Or the old name for it is conarium, which means a cone-shaped organ. But before I go into that, what I want to do, Dr. Richard King has left some great works for us, not left in the sense that he's gone, but he has provided us with some information. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out as an introduction by reading some of his information to you. But before I do that, I want you to recognize that in the male and in the female, there are orifices in which things go in and go out. In the female, there are 12 orifices lined with melanocytes making melanin. In the male, there are 9 orifices. Now, people with numerology, Brother Browder and so on, the 9 will give you a total of, well, let's say the female has 12, that'll be a 3. And the male has 9, that's 9. And 9 plus 3 will give you how much? 12. And then you add the 12, you get what? A 3. And that's a complementary. Now, he can tell you what all that means. The Trinity, which means you got to have the male principle, and you have to have the female principle, and that the male principle combines with the female principle through one of the main orifices, and that is the generative organs, to make a new life. That's the complementarity. And those orifices, as I said earlier, are lined with cells that we call melanocytes. If you look at the Senegalese people, their lips are very, very dark. And then inside there is a red thing with blood vessels and mucous membrane. So you got to have the male principle, female principle. So when we mention the doorway to the temple and the black dot, as I read this, I want you to close your eyes and think about those 9 orifices in the male and 12 in the female, and think about the deeper meanings to these words, because I found them very powerful. Let me read that for you. Take a little time, but listen with your eyes shut. All right, so here we go. The black dot, the ancient symbol for blackness, doorway to life, the hidden doorway, archetype of humanity, universal laws written in the black sea, hidden in every dimension of time and space. All life comes from the black seed. All life is rooted in blackness. All colors, all vibratory energies were a shade of black. Black was the color of the night sky, primeval ocean of outer space, birthplace and womb of the planets, stars, and galaxies of the universe. Black holes were found at the center of our own galaxy and countless other galaxies. Black was the color of carbon, the key atom found in all living matter of our world. Carbon atoms linked together to form black melanin, the first chemical that could capture light and reproduce itself. The chemical key of life. And the brain itself, the chemical key to life. And the brain itself found to be centered around the black neuromelanin, inner vision, intuition, creative genius, and spiritual illumination were all found to be dependent upon the pineal gland's blood-borne chemical messengers that control skin color. Black dot was found to be the hidden doorway to universal knowledge of the past, present, and future. Melanin blackness studies at least 300,000 years. the black dot, the hidden doorway through which the transforming soul energy of Uraeus passes. Uraeus is the symbol of the transforming energy for the soul. The 7 levels of consciousness through which the black brain, spinal cord, endocrine relationship. Kuan, the land of spirits and gods. The Great Lakes of Africa, Lake Mwanza, sometimes called Victoria, and Lake Rudolph at the head of the Nile, birthplace of the Egyptians. Pygmy, which are Twa people, parents of all humanity. That's very, very powerful. What that is saying is that there is blackness throughout the universe. Blackness in the outer space, blackness on the earth, blackness in your body, and we're here to explore some of that information. We've had some wonderful presentations to bring that out spiritually and otherwise. I'm an anatomist, hematologist, microbiologist for many years, etc. And went to medical school and I looked at many cadavers in the head area where we do a montage of the sectioning of the brain, and the deeper we get into the brain, the more melanin we see, except in Caucasian bodies that we use, you don't see as much. All right, so I have slides to show you the anatomy of the pineal, and I'm going to talk about the functions, and I'm going to talk about some spiritual applications that gland is used, and talk about its calcification, and talk how you can get back in touch, and if yours is calcified, to reconstitute it so that it can work for you. So we're going to deal with the pineal gland. But before we do that, look at the slide on the wall. This is not the molecule called melanin. This is what the Caucasians have pieced together. As Phil and I were talking, they can construct this based on a pulse, and that pulse is like a heartbeat, so they can capture a pulse. Then they interpret that pulse, capture another, they try to interpret that, and then they put all that together. What this is showing is, if we look over on the part of the screen here, how do you do it? Okay, I got it. All right, right here. Can you see this?
Yeah.
All right. This says heme, or bowel pigment. Heme is the color red of the red blood cells. It's the pigment of the red blood cell without the globin part. The globin part is the protein part. The heme is the pigmented part. So what happens when the red blood cells are worn out after about 120 days, I think it's less than that, but we have to use the standard number, the cells of the spleen, located on your left side, the cells in there puncture a hole in the membrane of those old worn out red blood cells, and then takes it out, goes into the bloodstream, over to the liver, and the liver takes it through biochemical changes, splitting off the globin part from the heme, and the globin is recycled to make more hemoglobin, and the heme is degraded by catabolic actions down to its pigment, which gives your urine your color and your feces its color. So they have put together in this so-called melanin molecule nothing but body pigments. That's not melanin. A lot of the melanin in your system, and especially EU melanin, which means good, efficient, proficient, and otherwise, that eumelanin that we have is dark brown to black. And there's a lot of sulfur in that chemistry that makes your skin brown to black, or other parts of your body. The Caucasian people have a pheomelanin. The sister showed a slide with the spelling there. Pheomelanin has selenium as a part of its chemistry, which is a second type of sulfur. That's why theirs doesn't get black, except in certain parts. Can't get black in the skin because it's mainly of a selenium type. And I did lots of researches with enzymes that have selenium at its core, and I didn't even know why. I was working for them with their stuff. Look at this chiral ring over here. Pineal ring is a part of the one at the bottom here. I can't get this to work. Somebody can show me now. The pineal ring there is a part of B vitamin. The beta carotenoid is a part of a B vitamin complex. Up in the upper right-hand corner, ubiquinone is a part of the vitamin A. Riboflavin over in the left-hand corner is a part of another B vitamin. And those rings in the middle are complex. So you don't have a melanin molecule that you can depend on that has anything at all to do with us. What I'm saying is that we are sun people. Part of our chemistry has to do with the hydrogens from the sun. Four of them fused together gives us helium. So we're breathing in, as sun people, in the sun, helium molecules and hydrogen ions. And that is the basis of my telling people when I do the lectures on what to eat and nutrition and things. I tell people that we as melanated people should be eating those fruits that are citrus in nature, because they have a lot of hydrogen ions, thus acid. And the sun has the same thing. So we're compatible with those fruits. Don't let anybody tell you that a lemon or a lime in any quantity will cause your kidneys, the tubules in your kidneys and the nephrons to be destroyed. That is not so for melanated people. It is so for somebody else. So our food should be that of the sun. The sun has cooked and baked those fruits and so on, and the vegetables as well. And you should be eating those. And unfortunately, I'll get to the pine in a second, but unfortunately what they have done is that they have genetically engineered so much of it, and also cut out farming in this country to a great degree, such that imports of foods are brought into this country now more than ever. And I did a lecture on that. So that you can get a watermelon the whole year round. Right. The correct thing to do is to eat fruits that are in season, grown in an area that you are used to, and that the climate is that which produced you. And then when that changes, the other foods that are in season in that climate, you should be eating, so that you get a vast array of minerals, vitamins, and nutrients that you need. Underground things for the winter, and not watermelons. And so on, peaches in the winter and so on. That is not correct. That limits you, plus they're genetically engineered, and nobody really knows the defects that are involved in the biostructure of those chemically engineered, genetically engineered foods. So if you don't eat those foods which contain all the nutrients and the pigments that you need to replenish the pigments in your body, which will disappear when their use is over, then you're not going to be able to regenerate those melanated centers, and we specifically will focus in on the pineal. All right. So this is a single gland. Listen to this text. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. That's in Matthew 6:22. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body will be full of light. You take a camera container or a film container and you punch a hole in the bottom of that film plastic container and use that to read in the newspaper print, you'll see that it's magnified 3 or 4 times. Why? Because the light is concentrated through a thin pinhole, making it more magnified. The smaller the hole, the more magnification it has. The wider the hole, the less magnification. So the pineal here is said to be that kind of gland that's going to fill your body with light, and I'm going to show you how in a few minutes. Because thou canst not see with thy natural eyes, I will give thee a divine eye. That's from the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad, thanks. Gita chapter 9. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Matthew 6:38. That means that when we use the word heart, we're talking about I've looked into this, the origin of the soul. At early gestation, day 1, or in the chick, and it's a little later in the human. At the part that's going to form into the heart, you will get a movement or a pulsatile movement, meaning there's a contractility of a structure with some blood vessels starting to form. That contractility will develop into a heart with 4 chambers. In my viewing of that, that contractility is the origin of the soul. And that will take its location in that right atrium of the heart's 4 chambers in an area we call, with specialized cells that we call the sinoatrial node, which is the pacemaker of the heart. That sets the pace. That's the soul. There's a communication between that heart and the pineal gland that is direct.
All right.
And the deeper you get into the knowledge of this, the more it makes more sense. That the heart represents the origin of the soul, that is the core of the you. Those blood vessels are streaming off from the heart eventually and forming blood vessel tracts and channels throughout the body, carrying the life force, and perhaps the soul recirculates. But the pacemaker is what they call the soul, or the soul is what they call the pacemaker. So when your right atrial chamber goes out of whack, then they put a false pacemaker or an electrical pacemaker there to stimulate your real pacemaker as if it's still active, which makes your heart beat at 70-something beats per minute, which puts it back towards normalcy. Now, that pineal gland is located in the head, in the brain. Now this is what I need to connect for you. You have 2 eyes. The 2 eyes are an extension of the brain embryologically. And encoded in the iris of your eye, each eye, is a pattern of the entire organ systems, no matter what organ it is, legs included and arms of your body, encoded, bringing forth itself reflexly from the brain into those irides that you carry in your eye, and the rest of the encoding is in the brain itself. So your eyes are an extension of the brain to see what's outside happening, to communicate that back to the brain and interpret that, and you call it I see.
All right.
So this is an example of the tracks where the light comes in through the 2 eyes. This is the undersurface of the brain turned over. With the 2 eyes, you're looking down on the undersurface of the brain. With the 2 eyes pointing forward, your nose would be up at the top and the back of your head at the bottom. And here are the tracks going in through where the light will travel through into the cornea here, and then back straight to the retina. And then here are the nerves traveling here, and then they make a turn. They synapse on a very special part of the brain that we call the lateral geniculate body, and then they turn and go to the occipital lobe on either side, and then they cross before they do that. So one side of you is interpreted on the left side, that is the right side of you is seen from the left side partly, and the left side of you is seen through the left brain partially. All right, so these are and this is how light gets into the brain itself. Now I'm going to make the connection between this optic nerve here and the pineal gland and some structures nearby like the pituitary gland and like there's a part called the superior colliculus. It sends, the cerebellum sends some fibers there. So your eyes have 20 times more input to the brain than the ears. That's why you use your eyes to see. Oh, I see. Not your ears to hear what you see. You see what you see and hear what you see also, because of the nerve input by way of the eyes to those structures that are deep to the brain, and then finally to the cortex where consciousness is perceived, intellect is perceived, hallucination is perceived, clairvoyance is perceived. But the pineal is the orchestrator. Now I'm going to go deeper and tell you about some other structures. This is a sagittal section. You cut the brain straight down the middle. There's a space there. You cut the brain straight down the middle, and you look at only one side from the side. So this is a sagittal view of the right side of your brain, looking at the media part of that right side. And you'll see this structure right here. Right in here. That is the hypothalamus, right there. Here is the pineal body. You see it there? Right here? This is a cadaver brain. This is how a cadaver brain looks when you make a picture of it. It's a sort of grayish beige color. Any other kinds of drawing of this would be a graphic view of that part. But this is the gray matter up here. The new part of the brain we call the neocortex. This is the more ancient part of the brain where all the nuclei having to do with every structure in your body is registered in this particular area. So this is the pineal here, and this is part of the optic nerve here, and the pituitary gland is not on this slide. So there are nuclei located right in this hypothalamus that controls the entire body functions. Satiety, meaning you feel full after you eat. Temperature control is registered there. When your baby gets too hot and feverish, it is that center that is alerted so that the elevation of the temperature is attempted so that any chemicals or toxins or poisons that's going to injure the you will be taken care of and split biochemically, and the body recycles it and does what it needs to do with it. Fever won't kill you necessarily. But the body has this compensatory response to toxins and other things so that it knows what to do. So that hypothalamus is very important. There are nuclei there. There's a nucleus, remember this when I get to it again, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Suprachiasmatic nucleus is going to feed some neurons into the pineal when light hits the pineal, and I'm going to show you how that happens. This is another structure. This is a drawing. This is the posterior aspect of the brain where the pineal is located. And right here represents that pineal body, or that epiphysis cerebri that I talked about. There is an opening here called the third ventricle. There is another one down in this area called the fourth ventricle, and then there are two lateral ventricles. They all communicate by sending fluid all the way down the spinal column inside of an envelope that we call meninges, back up into the brain, into the lateral ventricles, that is, ventricle in this part of the brain, this lobe, ventricle in here, and they communicate right down the center through the third ventricle. That fluid exits, bathes the pineal body, bathes the pituitary, bathes those 12 nuclei in the body, like the substantia nigra in the midbrain, and the locus coeruleus in the fourth ventricle area, down the fourth ventricle area, down through the cord, back up and over again. When people talk about kundalini, they're talking about the movement of that energy in the fluid called the cerebrospinal fluid, down the cord, back around, through the brain, and so on and so forth. Now when light, this is the brain of a sheep, and the reason why I know that is because if you look right here, the sheep's brain, the olfactory, this is called the olfactory bulb, is bigger. We do in our class, in our anatomy class, we always have the sheep brain that we dissect, and we look specifically for these parts. We see the pineal gland sitting there. It's very nice. We see the olfactory bulb and all that. So when light comes in, look what happens. Goes into this eye, from this eye, crosses right here at a part called the optic chiasma, and then it travels down. Here's the pituitary gland. It's going to stimulate the pituitary. Now the pineal is in the back of all of that, but there are axons and neurons that communicate and connect between that pineal gland and other structures and this pituitary. They work together. So here is the pineal. They just put it there as behind. That's why it's dark there. And then the light goes down the spinal cord. Look, this is part of the spinal column here. The light travels, energizing these electrons, passes the medulla, goes down the cord, and then at a part on either side of you deep called the sympathetic chain, and this part of the sympathetic chain is called the superior cervical ganglion. That means that a lot of cell bodies there with melanin. And so it's going to synapse onto another neuron here and go back up the cord. See it here? Going back up. And when it does this, it's going to, that light will stimulate the axons and the nuclei in that suprachiasmatic nucleus I told you about in the hypothalamus, and that's going to influence the pituitary, the pineal gland rather, to start secreting its substance. Now that pineal gland is an endocrine organ. There are 12 of them in your body. Something about 12. When you talk about the 12 disciples, you're talking about metaphysical applications. Pineal is comparable to Peter. Peter was the person who didn't have much what? Faith. So the pineal gland is your gland of faith. If you have faith in something, that something is your reality. Now I'll talk a little bit more later. And the pituitary gland that it communicates with is your gland. In other words, the pineal is of faith and the pituitary is your psychic gland, because there's a ganglion located just near there that helps to feed into you imaging and imagination. So your pineal is both a psychic gland as well as the gland that deals with imagination. And I'm going to tell you how you can use imagination and faith to correct any problem inside of your body. There's no such thing as there's no cure for arthritis or diabetes. If you change certain things, hypertension, and any other kind of maladjustment of your body. It is a matter of thinking. It is the consciousness that destroys us, with the physical being secondary to the thinking. 70 to 90% of your physical ailments arise first as an emotional, psychological kind of input. And then the physical comes therefrom. Change the thinking, you change the physical condition. Health will be yours. You will return to the pristine health that you're born with, and your birthright is good health and not disease. Now, when that light hits, that goes back up the cord, energizes the suprachiasmatic nuclei, and then it goes to the pineal gland. If you do a histological section of the pineal gland, you'll find that one little gland, which is a single gland, the only of those 12 is single. All the others are double. The pituitary is also double. Embryologically, it starts out as the downgrowth from one type of tissue and the upgrowth from the other type of tissue, and they come together with an intermediate portion in the middle. So the pituitary is two glands, just like the male's testicles. Exactly the same. As above, so below. The pineal too hangs off a stem we call the habenular stalk, which is nothing but axons, and it hangs off by itself. You saw the round one I showed you there, right here, but it's better on the other slide that I just had for you. But this one is comparable to the uterus. And the fallopian tubes are the stalks, because it hangs off the third ventricle, the roof of the third ventricle, which is an opening to let the fluid through. It's bathed when the fluid comes out of that third ventricle on its way to the fourth ventricle and the cerebellum down the cord. So the pineal gland is the only gland. That's why the text I read for you, that I be single. We're talking about a single gland. It's the only gland in the body that is single in its anatomical structure. Every other gland, including your breast, are double. And including the testicles, as I mentioned, is double. The ovaries are double. The adrenals are double. The thyroid gland here in your neck, there are two lobes connected by an isthmus. So if you do a histological section of the pineal gland, and on a slide, and stain it of course, you'll see there are two kinds of cells there. There are dark cells and there are light cells. The dark cells are reminiscent of the rods and the cones in the eye, which I'll show you a little later. And the light cells and the dark ones make the melatonin and the serotonin. The light cells serve as a framework for the dark cells, which look like rods and cones, meaning that it was an original eye. And some animals it still is. So you have dark cells there, light cells. The dark cells are dark because they have melanin granules or chemistry in them. Melanin is a chemistry. This is not something that's a cell. It is a chemical component. Melanin is dark. Pheo is a melanoid. Pheo is a melanoid, means it is a form of our melanin. That's why they're using melanin in the research. Because PHAEO melanin, pheomelanin, is dusky. So in categorizing it, it is a melanoid. Oid means a form of whatever the prefix is. So in this case, it's a form of melanin. That's why theirs can't get black unless, certain conditions. So this pineal gland produces melatonin. You've heard that already. Melatonin is produced in very small quantities. About 12 micromolars is very, very small. So when they sell it in the stores, they're not selling you the true melatonin that's produced naturally in your body. They're selling you some kind of chemistry that they either extracted from cadavers or from the sheep or the bovine, meaning the cow's pineal gland or whatever, and biosynthetically organized so that now they can put it into a pill, and they add to it, as far as I can detect, valerian, which is a herbal which makes you sleepy. So when you take melatonin, you get sleepy and you get all kinds of adverse effects. They call them side effects. I call them effects. So this pineal gland then has a lot to do with your 24-hour pattern or circadian rhythm. That is, it's a rhythm of physiological activities that follow every 24-hour pattern. And that circadian rhythm is automatic, but it's environmentally influenced by light and darkness. That's why when you work at night, you are throwing off that 24-hour circadian pattern such that you can cause some kind of harm, which I'm not pinpointing, to the rest of your physiology. It is best that gland is entrained or synchronized to produce melatonin in the night. That gets you in touch with the dream state, and it's supposed to decrease aging and so on. And in the daytime, of course, it increases that darkness. And in the daytime, that melatonin then changes its biochemistry just by changing one little side group on the molecule and becomes serotonin, which is your daydream state. You're sitting in your car and somebody looks at you and you're not looking directly at them, and that serotonin and other things direct you over to that person. You look right into their eyes. So it is a gland that needs to be given a lot of more attention by the researchers, because for a long time I have those papers, those reprints that said that the pineal, like the appendix, had no function until very recently they start to resurrect those functions and to tell us that there is some function to the pineal. Just a slide to show you that in the body, melatonin is produced by the pineal, which is located in the posterior aspect of your brain, but superior to the cerebellum, which is this rugged part here, which has to do with balance. Now, there were two scientists who did a mapping of the brain, and they located 12 sites in the brain that contain melanin. When melanin is in the brain, we call it neuromelanin. There are no melanocytes in the brain. So the chemistry of melanin is slightly different than the skin melanin here, which we call melanin, skin dermal melanin. So there are no melanocytes there making the melanin. So it has to be laid down by eating those foods containing pigments so that it can resupply those centers and change and take in all those colored pigments, even the ginger root has a color to it. If you don't believe it, take the juice out, put a little lemon juice there, and it turns pink. So everything in nature has pigments. So those pigments are used metabolically to regenerate any cells you have in the body or any deep structures that need to be regenerated. So the mapping of the brain stem was done by 2 scientists, and they said that there are 12 brain sites with EU melanin located in the area around those ventricles that I showed you. So we call them circumventricular organs. The locus coeruleus being one, and the substantia nigra of the midbrain being another. Those have the highest amount. We can see those when we do sections deep into the brain, although there are 12 others. I have a slide here to show you them. All right, so this is a median section through the brain, similar to the cadaver one I showed you, that has, this is the corpus callosum here, this dark piece here. This is not melanin. These are white fibers that come up the cord, cross in the brain at that side to go to nuclei on your left side, and then on the left side they come up the brain. At that same point they cross again, and those fibers crossing are the biggest of the crossing we call decussation, and so that's called the corpus callosum that holds the 2 hemispheres together. So now here is the 3rd ventricle area here, and it is endowed with a lot of capillaries. Blood capillaries are responsible for diffusion of materials between the outside and the inside. So here are some of those centers. Here's the pineal right here. And here's another structure. There are 12 of them. I have the list of all of them. And look where it comes around to. This is the pituitary gland. So it has some melanated centers also in it. That's why I said that it communicates by way of axons between itself and the pineal. These are in touch with each other, and they respond to each other based on the thinking and how you're able to manage that thinking. So these are the 12 centers: substantia nigra, nucleus, brachialis, pigmentosus. I won't name all of them, just a couple of them, locus coeruleus, and so on. And that has been demonstrated and mapped by 2 scientists. Now, of these 12 centers, as I said, the locus coeruleus and the substantia nigra are the most well-known and most studied. And we see more melanin in those areas when we do studies of the deep portion of the brain. So that those deeply pigmented melanated centers are there. The reason why we're talking about melanin here is that they are transducers of energy. The light comes in through the eyes, goes down the cord, comes back up through another neuron, and goes up to the hypothalamus, and then communicates with the pituitary fibers as well as the pineal, and stimulates the pineal to make its secretion, and then it outpours that into the bloodstream. The pituitary also, melanocyte stimulating hormone, goes to the melanocytes in the night, so that it can develop the pigment granules in the melanocytes, which are really nerve cells themselves. They are dendritic processes or cells. And so the black dot that we're talking about, that's locus coeruleus, really literally means black dot. It comes from a Sanskrit meaning, which means black dot. So you got black centers there acting as batteries in your brain. If you did not have them, your brain wouldn't function, because you need them to start energizing the electrical current to make everything else in your body work. So if you get it in touch, get in touch with your pineal gland, it will start vibrating at a certain frequency when induced by sound and by light. And since it stands on, it is the end of some structures, so it can vibrate at a certain frequency. And as it does that, the fluids increase, and it pours out a certain kind of essence, meaning hormone, into the brain, and that stimulates those short axons that go to your cerebrum, and that puts you in touch with the highest energy, because the vibrational energy is much more rapid. The faster the vibrational energy, the more in tune you will be with higher vibrational forces we call cosmic forces. I mean, the physicists can't define a cosmic ray, but we can when we talk about meditation, that the cosmic energy is the fastest vibrational energy, and you come in contact with that when the pineal gland becomes activated. That's why in those churches where they talk in tongues and so on, I don't denounce that, because that's real. That's the only time that you are in touch with the highest form of energy, when it's stimulated by the drums, by the sound, and by your environment, such that it puts you in touch with that energy of all-knowing in the higher consciousness of your brain, perceived as something that's beyond the normal. And that's the only time you feel that, when that's energized. The pineal is the innervator of that. So that if there's a malfunctioning of any area in this brain, in the brain area that contains melanin granules, such as the locus coeruleus and so on, you're going to suffer from memory loss. When people have Parkinson's disease, it's a conglomerate of brain structures that are damaged. It is the fibers that are coming from the cerebellum that make contact with the brain stem here, that makes contact with the higher forms up here, and those melanated centers that are in all parts of this brain here lose their melanin function, and perhaps some of the melanin itself, and the vibrational energy or the function or the electrical currents cannot be fulfilled. And so you get a malfunctioning of the input energy from these neurons in the cerebellum, and so you see people lose their gait. So they walk pigeon-toed, their hands start to tremble, and we call that Parkinson's disease. All the research that has been done on that shows that in Parkinsonianism, it is a decrease in the functioning or in the area we call the substantia nigra in the midbrain. And so what they do is you send the patient to Sweden. They have the highest development of lab facilities there. And so what they do is they put you out, put you under anesthesia, and then they have an injectable ready to inject into the brain, in the midbrain, through the part of the brain here, deep to the brain, stimulating the area that's going to make melanin, the substantia nigra. And the injectable it's funny, the injectable, I was at a conference and there were scientists there from all over, and that injectable was cells taken from aborted fetuses, black. Also cells, he told the source of the cells from the black sheep, the pups of the pregnant sheep. You take them out, you etherize the sheep, take out the pups, you take out the liver, and any other part that you want, depending on what you're treating. Aplastic anemia, you would need the liver cells. And you would put those cells in the form of an injectable. The patient is strapped down on a certain contraption, and you press a button, and the head goes to where the needle is aimed, and it goes straight through into your deep centers where the substantia nigra is, and the injectable is released there, and then, which is dopamine, L-dopa rather, and then the patient recovers, and the patient walks straight, and so on. So they're using melanin to treat certain diseases. People who have the money can go to those labs for treatment, but they're using the melanin. That's why my message to you here is to keep your melanin centers activated by eating raw foods that are pigmented, which they all have. The brother said don't eat anything white, like white floured products and so on. Eat those foods that grow from nature in the raw state as much as possible, and center your whole meal around a raw food, a raw salad with a mixture there, and not mix the fruits and the vegetables together. There should not be any bananas eaten with watermelon. Melon should only be eaten alone. That's a pigment. It's going to feed your centers metabolically. The body will do what it has to do. You don't even have to be there to tell it so. Fruit should be eaten compatibly. Vegetables should be mixed appropriately, as much in the raw state as possible. If you have to eat cooked ones, you do that until you can get stronger. But I can tell you that if you do some fasting and cleansing out, you'll find that much of your problems will disappear in the winds. The body has a way that it can correct itself. No outside external drug is going to correct your body. You destroy all those melanated centers, and this pineal keeps you in touch with those centers if you treat it right by giving it the right kind of foods. They have done research on the frog and on it's a western tree frog. I teach a course where I use the frog, where I use another kind of animal that's the lowest form of vertebrates that's called the sea lamprey in the larva form. And when we get to the brain part of this comparative anatomy course, I have the students define the pineal in the sheep, pineal in the frog, pineal in a form of the lizard that we use, the pineal in the human structure. Of course, we don't have a human brain, but we have a model. And of course, we use the sheep and the cat because the cat represents closely that of the human. And so they have found that in the frog, which is the amphibian, just have one more minute. Thank you. All right. The pineal is sitting right under the skin of that frog. You can't tell it from the bumpy skin of the frog, but it's a photoreceptor cell, a neuroendocrine photoreceptor cell. That means that it takes the light in, and it's called the third eye, the eye of Deva in human, the eye of wisdom, the eye of God, the eye of Siva, the single eye, and so on. But that pineal body sitting just underneath that skin, like a bump on the frog's skin elsewhere, is there to receive light. The pineal is like an endocrine gland because it has a neuronal input and an endocrine output, meaning there's small blood vessels there, capillaries, to receive the output and take it to where it has to go. So that gland is useful. My last little point, our ancestors, this is the little metaphysical part, and I must put this in. Our ancestors said that this gland, I mentioned earlier, is a gland of faith. Now faith, it's funny that faith is located in the 7th chakra, we call the crown chakra, pretty close to that pineal gland, and the ancients thought the pineal per se is it. In us, it's deep. In animals such as the lizard, the frog, and so on, it is more superficial, just underneath the skin or underneath the flat bone cranium cavity. In the children, for example, the skull, there's a little membrane between these two lobes of the skull bone, or these two bones of the skull. And that membrane is there because those two bones have not annealed together. They are open. There is a soft spot there, meaning the bone hasn't come together as a suture. So the light and other kinds of vibrational force can penetrate that membrane, go deep to the pineal, and energize the pineal, as I said earlier, and puts that child in touch with even clairvoyance. That child has an all-knowing up to 9 years old when that suture closes, and then the whole thing kind of goes away. So the children then are very strongly aware and sensitive to whatever is around them, to the extent, as I said, of clairvoyant experiences. So when you stimulate that gland, it will send that power and that energy out, releasing it, so that it will give you enough faith to remove mountains. That's what that scripture means. That if you get in touch with that, the reason why the pineal is calcified in a lot of people is because once we plunge into the physical state and into materialism, the pineal spiritual aspect is lost. And so the pineal has no more use in a way, so it calcifies in about, close to 60% of Caucasian women, and in about 13% of Asians, and far less than Africans that they studied. So that gland of faith, then, if you have faith in anything, it helps you to activate that gland, or it activates your faith, so that you will have that energy more than electricity in any one of these buildings here, and it will cause things to happen for you. Faith is the only guarantee of immediate success in healing. He who becomes a master of his faith can become the master of his health, because faith is the force that produces life-giving results. Faith makes things get done without doubt. It is intuitive. Faith is that which is believed. Faith is a deeper inner conviction. It is a state of certainty. Faith is that super assurance that something is going to happen for you. So when you feel deeply, you liberate that energy from the pineal that we call a melatonin, serotonin, and other kinds of metabolites, so that now it puts you in touch with higher consciousness. So your thinking is your faith. Whatever you're firm about, in your thinking, you have faith in. Through firm belief in the release of this energy, this energy can work either for you or against you. Sick people have a lot of faith, but they have done the wrong thing. So your attention is your faith. Whatever gets your attention gets your faith. Whatever you give your attention to, you have faith in. Whatever you're deeply convinced about, you have faith in. Whatever you expect and prepares for, you have faith in. People that have hay fever every year, it's May next month. I'm going to have hay fever. They have faith and they imagine that they're going to have hay fever. Sure enough, they will. You hear people say, it runs in my family, because they're expecting this thing. Their imagination is run by the pituitary gland. So you imagine that you're going to have this thing. You imagine your cancer is going to kill you. You imagine your hypertension is going to cause strokes and all this kind of cardiovascular problems, and that will be what you have. That will be the reality. Faith is a reality for those who put faith in things. So if you can put faith in the diseases, you can put faith that you can heal yourself. You sit, you meditate, and you focus in, cleanse the mind of the day's activities, shut out everything, close off the radio, TV, turn out the lights, and focus in on the area of doubt or disease that you have, and then focus there and put your whole faith and trust and imagine that that gland is healthy, that there's nothing wrong with that part. Even if it's impotence or other kinds of generative problems, or fibroids, prostatitis, which are diseases of ego damage, and diseases that someone has abused you of the opposite sex. That's what prostatitis, 70-90% I said, of diseases are mental and emotional. Sometimes prostatitis is a triangle relationship where you're involved with this one, involved with that one, and yourself is in the middle, like a pyramid, or at the other end. So when you cleanse yourself of all those doubtful, degenerative processes, learn what it is you must eat, how to feed your melanated center, then you won't have to worry about these words we hear around here called AIDS. That's a word, that's an acronym. It means nothing. You cannot acquire anybody's immunodeficiency like you cannot acquire anybody's health. So this is a problem that we need to focus in on and get in touch with certain realities and stop buying into all the goobly goob that we get from outside of here, and get in touch with what these conferences are trying to teach us, and then our health would be the best. We're the strongest people on this planet. We got all the inward things that we need, even the hair. That hair is pulling in currents, taking out and releasing heat and other kinds of toxic things through the hair bulb, which is like a straw. It has an opening. And so that sends out or takes in electromagnetic forces and other kinds of energies. So when you bleach it, you destroy that. So you got everything you need as tools for good health, but you have to manage it appropriately and properly, and not let the Europeans manage it for you, or the Caucasian people manage it for you. And your health will be yours. Grayness and old age, count your age backwards, I tell people. If you're 39, you're going to be 40 tomorrow, you're 38. Next year, you're 37. And you're 36. You're 35.
That's a good idea.
And if you live long enough to be 20, you stop right there. Because now you're going to dress a certain way, you're not going to put on carry a crutch, you're not going to start doing like this and so on. You see, when you bend over, it has to do with the thinking. The thinking crumps your height. So you lose height, you start to bend over. Anytime you see a bent over person, you know it's the thinking that has crystallized them and crystallized in a part of their body called the axis of their body, which is the spinal cord, the vertebra.
Yeah.
And then the nerves coming out that will be affected also. So put your mind in touch with the realities of good health, get back to pristine health. We can live, and we have the ability to live to be 150 years old. And the only way you can do that is that you have to eat what your body is biologically designed to do, and you have about 5 feet of plumbing there called the digestive tract that is meant for things to be pulled along that track, taking out that which it needs metabolically along the way, and the transient time should be very short. So if you have 3 turnovers a day, it means your body is working very efficiently. If you're not, then you're filled with toxins that can recirculate by taken back into the capillaries and then circulated throughout the body, re-polluting the system. So let your melanin work for you. We don't have these conferences in vain. We want you to be able to sit and to think and to get in touch with that pineal, bring it back to life, get out of materialism, too much materialism, and the physical emphasis, and get in touch with the spiritual. Mind, body, and spirit have to be all there together. With that, I must say, Hotep, my brother, thanks very much. I wasn't being selfish. I just had to say that to you. God bless you.
Sister Brown knew that Brother Richard King was going to talk to you about psychiatry, spiritual development now. Sister Brown knew that he's such a kind and loving, dedicated person to this Melanin Conference that whatever time she needed of his, she could take, and he will still get us out here on time. All right. So come on, Brother King, do your job.